roughly 8,000 years ago, literally built economies, fueled ancient empires, and totally transformed our global food supply. We're trekking an absolutely incredible journey today, one that starts with some spoiled milk and ends with, well, one of the most beloved foods in human history. Picture this. It's around 6,000 BCE. A nomadic herder is crossing the sun-baked desert of the Arabian Peninsula. They make a totally simple, everyday choice, pouring some fresh milk into a pouch made from a young animal's stomach, strapping it right to the side of a donkey and just walking for hours. Now, they're completely unaware that they're about to invent a global phenomenon. Because when they finally stop to take a drink, the milk is gone. Which brings us to Section 1, Ancient Accident, a Desert Mistake. You see, nobody sat down and engineered this on purpose. It was this highly specific, exact combination of environmental factors. The lining of a young ruminant's stomach contains this enzyme, right? It's called rennet. So when that fresh milk sat inside that lining, combined with the brutal desert heat and the constant rhythmic jostling of the donkey, well, the rennet reacted. It actually broke the milk proteins apart. It separated everything into a watery liquid called whey and these clumps of soft white solid at the bottom of the pouch. Curds. Literally, the very first cheese. And here's the thing, this wasn't just some tasty accident. It was a biological lifesaver. Early humans were actually largely lactose intolerant. Drinking fresh milk simply made them sick. But this accidental cheese-making process, it drained away all those problematic sugars right out with the whey, trapping the rich protein and fat in the curds. So it gave these families a dense, portable survival food, one that lasted way longer than milk. It allowed them to reap the benefits of dairy literally thousands of years before human DNA ever adapted to digest raw milk. It's an ultimate evolutionary hack. Fast forward to 1300 BC, and humanity had completely mastered this process. In fact, cheese was taken so seriously that, get this, when archaeologists excavated the Egyptian tomb of a high-ranking official named Ptolemy's, they found a jar containing this solidified white mass. Well, chemical analysis proved it was a 3,000-year-old cheese. It was actually sealed in the tomb as an offering to accompany the dead into the afterlife. I mean, that is how deeply cheese had already embedded itself into human culture. Moving on to Section 2, Fueling Antiquity, Cheese as Infrastructure. Let's look at how this builds from just a survival hack into the actual infrastructure of early civilizations. It spread and evolved so rapidly. Over in Mesopotamia, Sumerian temple records showed cheese was actually distributed as rations to the laborers, building some of the very first monumental structures on Earth. In Greece, it was literally woven into their mythology. Homer's Odyssey describes the Cyclops making cheese in his cave. And Olympic athletes? They ate it, firmly believing it brought them strength. But here's the crucial point. While the Greeks treated cheese like this sacred mythological tradition, the Romans? Well, they treated it like a highly standardized business opportunity. The Roman writer Columella actually penned the first Western cheese-making manual. He mapped out the exact timing, temperature, the whole shebang. And the Romans scaled this up efficiently. They standardized cheesemaking to such a degree that hard, aged cheese became a standard military field ration. Think about that for a second. These dense, non-spoiling blocks of calories successfully fueled Roman legions as they marched across a 250,000-mile road network, a network spanning all the way from North Africa to Britain. Okay, let's jump into Section 3, Monks and Middle Ages, Monastic Cheese Magic. Now, when the Roman Empire eventually collapsed in the 5th century, you'd probably think this whole sophisticated cheese-making network would just disappear entirely, right? But it didn't. It was saved by people with absolute patience and nothing but time. Christian monasteries essentially became the agricultural hubs of medieval Europe. Benedictine and Cistercian monks meticulously experimented with temperature and bacteria. We're talking over months, even years. They carved storage caves straight out of cliff sides. They developed the practice of washing cheese rinds with brine. And by doing all this, they accidentally gave birth to some incredibly complex, legendary classics. Roquefort, that was born when monks in southern France just embraced a unique blue mold growing in their caves. Parmigiano Reggiano, Gouda, these were also perfected through this tireless, devoted monastic experimentation. And through all this mastery, cheese actually became a legitimate form of currency. The entire economic fabric of some medieval regions was just woven around dairy. I mean, farmers were literally paying their taxes and rent in wheels of aging cheese instead of coins. In certain mountain communities, a family's wealth was quite literally measured by how many wheels of cheese they had stacked down in their cellar. Talk about liquid or, well, solid assets. That brings us to Section 4, Sailing the Seas, Cheese Exploration. So, as the age of exploration dawns, the very same food that fueled the Roman legions is now being packed into the hulls of European ships. Why? Because it provided incredibly dense calories without needing a single bit of refrigeration. Wheels of hard cheese kept colonial crews alive when the fresh food inevitably ran out. If you look at old ship manifests, it's listed right there alongside hardtack and dried beans. Wheels of Dutch Edam, for example, coated in that iconic protective wax, they were famous for surviving grueling 6-month ocean voyages to the Indian Ocean and the Pacific. And honestly, this rugged endurance is exactly how European dairy traditions successfully spread all the way across the Americas. Next up, Section 5, Industrial Cheese, the Cheese Revolution. So, for centuries, cheese had been this wild, handmade, artisanal product. But then, the mid-1800s arrive, and they violently shift the scale of production at a truly staggering speed. In 1851, a guy named Jesse Williams builds the very first cheese factory in New York. He started pooling milk from multiple farms just to create one uniform product. Then, soon after, Louis Pasteur comes along with pasteurization, which suddenly allowed large factories to process massive volumes of milk without the constant risk of contamination. And then in 1916, James L. Kraft patents a method for processing cheese with emulsifying salts. He created this smooth, sliceable product that basically never seemed to spoil. Almost overnight, cheese went from a highly variable farm good to a completely uniform manufactured commodity shipped by rail. To really understand the sheer scale of this change, just look at World War I. The U.S. military ordered 6 million pounds of Kraft's shelf-stable, unspoilable processed cheese in tin cans just to feed troops overseas. That is a lot of cheese. And when the war ended, Kraft naturally expanded into retail, pretty much permanently cementing those processed cheese slices into the modern American diet. But there was a catch. As factory standardization and pasteurization completely took over, they also killed off the wild, natural microbes. You know, the very things that gave traditional cheeses their complex, distinctive character in the first place. So by the time we hit the 1970s and 80s, food writers and chefs start asking this really uncomfortable question. Why did so much of this highly accessible, democratized cheese taste like absolutely nothing? Which leads us nicely into Section 6, Artisan Revival, a Global Movement. This huge pushback against bland, industrial food eventually sparked a massive artisan renaissance. And, ironically enough, it was spearheaded by the exact same country that gave the world cheese in a spray can, America. We saw this absolute explosion of small creameries start blending old-world European techniques with bold new innovations. The whole movement kind of culminated at the 2019 World Cheese Awards. An Oregon blue cheese called Rogue River Blue, which is wrapped in grape leaves and soaked in pear brandy, by the way, actually won the top global prize. It sent absolute shockwaves through the European establishment. It proved that the global craft revival was not only real, it was completely unstoppable. So today, we're left with this really fascinating duality. On one hand, you've got a Sardinian shepherd making pecorino by hand using methods that have barely changed since the days of the Roman Republic. But on the other hand, you have a factory in Wisconsin producing 50,000 pounds of cheese a day using computerized moisture and bacteria monitoring. It's ancient craft and staggering industrial scale just existing completely side by side to feed the world. Ultimately, it all comes back to one simple truth. Cheese was a survival technology way before it was a culinary tradition. I mean, why did it survive the collapse of empires? Why did it survive the Dark Ages? Because turning milk into cheese was originally the only reliable way to preserve precious calories for months on end, long before anyone even dreamed of a refrigerator. It kept early humans alive through brutal winters, and it fueled endless military campaigns. It was purely functional long before it became a culinary pleasure. And today, what started as one momentary mistake, literally just spoiled milk in an animal skin pouch roughly 8,000 years ago, is now a massive, booming global industry. We are currently producing over 22 million metric tons of cheese every single year across the globe. That's enough to fill thousands of cargo ships. It's just truly an incredible journey, going from a harsh desert survival hack to a universally beloved experience. It really proves that sometimes the greatest innovations aren't planned out in some lab. They just happen by total chance. Which leaves us with one final thought to chew on today.